Hello guys, um, I'm recording another video. I looked at my YouTube and I saw that it was 9 days since I last uploaded a video. I was like, whoa, that's too long. And so I figured just before locals, there's like 1 hour until I have to go for locals, I wanted to record a video. And yeah, I enjoy making these videos so much, so I was a bit shocked when I saw that there was 9 days since the last one. But I guess I've just been really busy with work, and then I finally made I finally finished the project I was working on just 1 day before the deadline, and I was like so happy. And then I got sick, like I got a cold, like a really bad cold, and I couldn't go to locals that weekend, and I was just completely out of commission, and it was really bad. And then this week I got back to work on Thursday and worked also yesterday, and then it's today. And so yeah, I guess it makes sense why it has been a while. But I have been spending time on Yu-Gi-Oh! Don't worry. Mostly though some non-Indian stuff that I have been thinking about. You know, I have been rocking the Queen Asmina deck for a while now. I'm still playing it, and still what I'm taking to locals today. So I feel relatively comfortable with it. I don't know if it's the strongest build of White Forest in Supreme Darkness format. You know, I still think the Fiendsmith version is really strong just because, you know, it's Fiendsmiths, and I just think this one is just a lot more fun to me. And I have really gotten very fond of the Asamina cards. It actually took me a while to start playing the Asamina cards, but now I'm playing a very Asamina focused build, you know, with 3 Debtors and with Queen Asamina and stuff like that. And I really just love it. I really love the Asamina cards. I think they're so good at filling in the holes of what the White Forest part is bad at. And, you know, like the White Forest cards are very predictable. You need multiple bodies on the field to sort of progress your game plan, you know, to synchro summon. And that's just very hard going second. There's not many quick plays or quick effects. So going second, you are mainly working with like very slow ignition effects and stuff like that, and it can be frustrating sometimes to play White Forest going second. But the Asamina cards are sort of exactly the opposite, in the sense that you don't really need any monsters on the field to get going, because you can send a lot of Sinful Spells cards from your hand, and there's also a ton of quick plays in the Asamina engine, so you can be not as predictable as when you are just, you know, normal summoning a Sylvie and adding a Tails to your hand, and I really hope you don't kill my Sylvie, because then I cannot activate my Tails. Stuff like that. And so I'm almost at the point where I want to say that I kind of like the Asamina cards a bit more than the White Forest cards. And I think that is sort of the reason that I have been putting off preparing for Alliance Inside, which is what today's video is about. I want to start preparing for Alliance Inside, because it's not too far away, and I need to start figuring out how to do this stuff, because it's gonna be the format for nationals. So whether I like it or not, I need to start practicing with these cards. But it's a bit different for me than with the Suda cards. With the Suda cards, I started preparing very early, like in November, and I was really eager to start testing with them, because the Supreme Darkness cards just... I think it's fair to say that it kind of doubled the power of the deck. At least doubled the power of the deck. And it was at the point where there was a lot of room for stuff in the White Forest deck, because, previous to that, we just had, the White Forest card from Infinite Forbidden and some Asamina stuff from Rage of the Abyss. And so there was pretty much space for all the new cards in Supreme Darkness, and there was no real issue fitting it in. But this time around, we are getting new cards, and of course new cards mean that the deck gets stronger. It has to mean that, because if nothing else, you can just not play the new cards, and if that turns out to be correct, it would be pretty surprising. But worst case, you just don't play the new cards and the deck remains the same power level. But obviously it's very likely that there is some of the new cards that will increase the power level of the deck. And I mean, of course, the poster child is the new field spell here. And I have printed proxies, and it's actually been a while since I printed these at work, and I just haven't gotten to cutting them out. Except for one Diabellstar Listen Adjudicator, but I still need to cut out all the rest. But yeah, so the field spell, of course, is a bit bittersweet for my current build of the deck, because, of course, as you know, it's everything we ever wanted in White Forest. It's the new starter we needed. We needed more consistency, and this is it. And so it solves all our problems, right? Well, except that when you activate it, you cannot summon Dark Monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn. And what that means is that when you look at the OCG lists currently, they're actually playing a pretty small Asamina package. And they're focusing instead on playing 3 copies of the field spells, and sometimes even terraforming or set rotation as well. And the reason for that is that if you play a smaller Asamina package, like just the Mauricio Lago and Ilia Silvia, basically, some people also play Saint, but primarily just Mauricio Lago and Ilia Silvia, which is kind of like what we did in Rage of the Abyss, right? Because we didn't really have Saint or anything like that. And so the reason for that is that then if you open the field spell, if you're forced to open with the field spell, you don't lose as much power. Your deck doesn't lose too much power, because you're giving up the Ilia Silvia Omni Negate and stuff like that, but ultimately that's not the worst thing ever. But if you look at a sort of more heavy Asamina build, like my current build, if I'm not able to summon the Asamina cards on my own turn, I lose a significant portion of power in my end board. Like, it's pretty significant. And so I have been a bit hesitant about starting this preparation for Alliance Insight, because I really like my current build, and I just don't like the thought of not going down on the Asamina stuff and playing less Asamina cards. I really like the Asamina cards. Of course, maybe there is a world where you can play a heavy Asamina build and still also play the fusion spell, and my first thought about that was a card like Debtors and, the fusion spell, Sinful Spells of the White Forest, stuff like that. You can still set that up, and just summon your Asamina monsters on your opponent's turn. And maybe that's completely fine. So maybe I'm overreacting a bit, and maybe you can still play a heavy Asamina field with the field spell. Could also be that we just play one field spell to search it as an extender, and then just hope not to be forced to use it as a starter. But I don't know. It's just a very tricky card for me personally. And I don't really want to go for the build that I'm seeing in the OCG right now, which is basically just Wild Forest with the new Diabell cards and a bit of Asamina just to set up the Omni, and then, 3 copies of the field spell. And I think that build is good, and so I'm not really arguing against the build. Even, works great with the Fiendsmith cards, because the Fiendsmith cards are of course all light from the extra deck, so you don't get blocked out of those with the field spell. But it also it does look a bit boring to me, and a bit stuck, right? You see like so many of the same list in the OCG and not a lot of innovation, and I just don't really feel like just copying an OCG list and let that be it. Like, that's just not really my style. And also, I don't really see how it's very strong going second. Like, of course, it's the tradition to treat Wild Forest as a coin flip deck, right? The Wild Forest engine is very weak going second, so you just build your deck hedging really hard against winning the die roll and going first. But I sort of feel like, and I have had a lot of fun trying to build a version of the deck that is actually can do stuff going second. And that's primarily the Asamina cards, right? And the builds I'm seeing in the OCG, I just don't really see how they solve any of the issues that Wild Forest has, except that, of course, we had an issue with consistency, and that is solved now with the field spell. But let me tell you, field spell not very good into detonator. So the field spell is like not very, like, again, it's very predictable going second. Like, if you open field spell going second, they will probably just pop it. Lots of decks has the tools to remove the field spell so that the effect won't resolve. And so it doesn't really solve the issues of White Forest going second, where number one issue is it's very predictable and slow, and two, you need to be able to synchro summon in order to progress your game plan. And the field spell doesn't really change anything about that. So, and by the way, I want to also say that I'm actually kind of happy and grateful that they did put this restriction on the field spell. I'm not complaining that there is this restriction on the field spell. I think it would be way too broken of a card if it did not have the restriction that you cannot summon Dark Monsters from the extra deck after you activate it. It would be way too broken. It's already insanely good as it is, and I'm happy they put a restriction on it, because I actually do like that one of the things I really like about Wild Forest is how challenging the deck building is. And so I love that they have put this restriction on witches. It's sort of a perfect condition if you think a restriction if you think about it, because it exactly hits that bittersweet point where the card is super powerful, but also it does clash with some of the Asamina cards, right? Which is just makes a ton of sense. I love that they designed it this way. So just please don't think that I'm complaining about the restriction. I think it's a very, very, very clever design choice. It just also makes it a lot tougher to deck build. And also, I should not get too much ahead of myself, because I guess today would be a pretty short video. I say, we only have 1 hour. I do have some coffee here. It's just instant coffee, but it has a bit of what we in Denmark call silt milk. It's fat milk. It's like 3.5% fat in the milk, which is, you know, very high. And then I also added a tablespoon, or not a tablespoon, a teaspoon of honey. And this is sort of because I've been kind of sick lately, and I'm still a bit sick. So just that honey and fat is really nice right now for me. So, and it's also not too bad because I just hit my weight goal, my first weight goal. I've been on a weight loss journey since May last year, and I hit my first big milestone, which means that I'm 25 kilos down. And so, you know, I think it's okay with a teaspoon, not a tablespoon, teaspoon of honey and some milk just for this time. And it does really make it taste really nice. But yeah, so that was a lot about the field spell, I guess. I should probably cut this stuff out. And so I feel like that's one of the big reasons that I have been putting off the Alliance Inside preparation, but I do need to start working on it because I need to have the best chances possibly for nationals. So I need to figure out the correct build, and I just don't want to net deck, just take an OCG list or whatever and play that. I just don't want to do that. It's not my style. I like making my own decks. I like doing things differently, and I'm just gonna say it right now. I have brewed with not playing a lot of Asamina, basically just a minimum Asamina package, and playing a more traditional, you know, think a bit more like Infinite Forbidden or Rage of the Abyss style of White Forest, where, you know, it's almost like you could play Toy Box or Rainbow Bridge or something like that. I used to play Rainbow Bridge in my White Forest deck, and when I saw this field spell, I was like, holy moly, that just makes Rainbow Bridge so much better in the deck. But of course, cards like Rainbow Bridge or Toy Box does not help you at all when you go second. And I'm just a bit tired of doing the whole go first White Forest stuff. I mean, obviously, I will always choose to go first when playing White Forest, but I'm tired of creating this deck that is so extremely powerful going first and so unbearably weak going second. It's just not... It just becomes a bit dull after a while, and I also wholeheartedly believe that it is not the best build of White Forest. I don't have any strong arguments, but I just want to say that the things that I'm seeing in OCG, the very standard stock lists that I'm seeing, I don't think they're weak. But I also am very, very convinced that there has to be some better build, because we are not seeing any innovation from the OCG right now. It's just the same list with maybe some slight tweaks and, you know, some cool tech choices and stuff like that. But no one is really trying to make major innovations in the White Forest deck. And I don't think that is the new cards are that simple, and I don't think that the deck is so easy to solve in a deck building wise manner that we have already reached the optimal build of the White Forest deck. Like, it was basically that what people played when Alliance Inside released, and it's the same thing now, even a month after or 2 months after. I can't remember how long it's been out in the OCG. And I just don't believe that this deck is that easy to solve. That has not been my experience. And also I think that the fact that we don't see anyone in the OCG trying radically different builds of White Forest means that they are not really experimenting with it, because the I'm looking at tournaments that aren't even that big, like 30 people or something like that, and there's a lot of them. And in those small case tournaments, there's no way that any like spicy brewer is not cooking something up and bringing it to a 30 people tournament. That's basically a locals, right? The fact that even at the local level there is no real experimentation is just a bit sad to me, to be honest. And you could obviously choose to believe that it's because that this is really the optimal build and it has been figured out and there is no real room for innovation anymore, and that you should just play this build and that's it, right? And it might be that that is the truth, but I just think that that is maybe a bit of a boring truth and not anything that I'm going to pursue. I'm going to try to figure something out. I'm going to try to build a heavy Asamina build with new cards, and I think that's going to be a very fun journey. And maybe at the end of it, I'm like, oh yeah, they were right. This is really just the correct way to build it, and I'll just do that. But then at least I would have known that I had tried all the other options beforehand. And I think the reason I'm thinking like this is because to me, White Forest is a long-term deck. I'm planning to play this in years to come. And this new support from Alliance Inside might be the last support we get for a while. And so maybe I will not be able to figure out the god build of this deck before Nationals. And maybe I'll just have to take, some OCG stock list to Nationals. But long term, I do strongly believe that there is more depth to this deck in terms of deck building than what we have seen from the OCG and even the TCG, to be honest. And I think one of the biggest joys of this games is trying to explore these puzzles yourself. And so that is sort of my plan for the Lines Inside. I'm gonna take a look at every card. I'm gonna be I don't want to dismiss any option immediately, and I want to try to focus on creating a Samina focused build of the deck, because I do think that the Samina cards are some of my favorite. And I do also want to maybe talk about a bit of another point with the new cards that made me sort of, I don't know, a bit hesitant or a bit like, I was not immediately convinced that the new cards solved the problems of the deck. And one of the things is the end board, because as you know, I took the Abao Aku build to YCS Birmingham, and I was what I thought was the strongest build at the time. And even also when you don't look at the Abao Aku builds, although those are pretty prevalent, also the Fiendsmith builds, who also tend to play Abao Aku. The thing is that your end board is very large in terms of monsters on the field, and there is actually not many free zones, and I think that this is the biggest problem of the current builds that we see of White Forest. When you make a Bawaku and you tag her out for something in the graveyard and she comes back in the end step, there's a lot of the games where you pass the turn with your extra monster zone empty and your regular monster zones completely filled up. because you have to make a power coup in the extra monster zone and you have to take her out, and because that is usually one of the last things you do, you don't summon a new monster into your extra monster zone. And you have this really clogged up board that it looks super powerful, and it obviously is super powerful, but it also does have a ton of weaknesses. Because you have almost all your stuff on the field immediately, it makes it so that your interruptions are way less layered, in the sense that your opponent could just go Raigeki, right? And you use your Omni Negate, your Ilya Silvera, and then just Raigeki again. And like, it makes it much more predictable when everything is on the board and you have this stuck, clogged up board. And also cards like, which were no problem beforehand, like Woes of the White Forest and Diabel, sometimes you cannot even activate them because you don't have enough space on your field. Like a card like Woes, people stopped playing it, not because it's bad, but because when you go full combo, you can't even use it. Like, there is no, you need 2 free monster zones basically, or you need, 2 zones so that you can have 2 monsters and synchro summon them with. And when you go full combo, especially with their Power Coup build, you just don't have any zones. So it's just, to me, that is a very big red flag and a problem. And I stopped playing a Power Coup because I feel like she just fed into the same issue. She clogged your board even more. She made you even more vulnerable to immediate interruptions on your board. And while a Power Coup in principle is layered interruption, it also is like, it's just, it doesn't really solve any of the issues with the end board. It makes the end board more predictable, and it puts all your eggs in the same basket, which is on your field, and there's not a lot of wiggle room of, you have to basically sequence your interruptions in a very specific order, right? Like, you have to always use your Ilya Silvia Omni Negate before the Abel in most cases, because you need to Ilya Silvera to tribute herself in order to free up a monster zone so that you can actually summon something with the Abel. And it goes on. And so the sequencing of your interruptions becomes way less flexible when your zones are clogged up. And what that means is that it becomes more predictable, because your opponent knows there's no way they're gonna book me before using the Omni. So I can do low commitment plays and they will feel forced to use the Omni first, right? So that is a huge problem, I think, with the deck. And when I look at the new cards, when you look at Diabelstar, the Sin Adjudicator, which is now a new piece of our end board because she is super strong. Basically, you can pay half your life point anytime and target one card on the field your opponent controls destroyed. And then if you have another Diabel monster card on the field, you can special summon one illusion or spellcast a tuner synchro monster from your extra deck. So she basically is Diabel 2.0. She does what Diabel does, but she also pops a card on the field. And granted, you do have to pay half your life points, which is kind of scary, but it's still a very strong end board piece, and you want to end on her on the field. And so, you see what I'm thinking about here, where I'm like, oh, okay, so now we need even more stuff. There's even more stuff that we have to end on the field, right? Because you need to inherent summon her, and I don't think she cannot really summon herself on the opponent's turn. So maybe you have some other way of summoning her on your opponent's turn, but I'm not currently aware of it. But yeah, so we have gotten a very strong card. I think that the Ability Destined Adjudicator is super strong for many different reasons. She's also treated as a Sinful Spoils card, so you can use her for your Azamina fusion summons. And she's also a Diabell Star monster, so you can search her with Wanted. And so I think it's a super strong card, and I'm really eager to play with her. But it's also sort of, now we have an extra thing that we need to end on, and we already had the issue with we have too many monsters on our end board, and it makes us vulnerable to something like a board wipe. And now we get a new thing that is super cool, but it's just another thing that we have to end on. And so that's one of the reasons why I think, a power coup will not be the main strategy moving forward from Alliance Insight, because what we need to do is we need to dial down on our import pieces and dial and turn up for more layered interruptions. And so we need to be very critical when we have an import piece, specifically a monster. We have to ask ourselves, does this really need to be what we do? Like, do we need to make a power coup and end on it? Does this really make our deck more strong? Or does it actually just feed into our weakness, which is that we put too many X on the field in our endboard? And so yeah, that I think is basically another thing where I saw, the Sin Adjudicator, and I think it's a super cool card, but it also made me think, how do we incorporate this into our deck in an elegant way? Because obviously you can't just spew out a bunch of monsters and end on like 5 boss monsters, and that's obviously very strong. I'm not really trying to argue that it's not a strong thing, that it's not a strong thing to do, but do we really need to do this? And so that I think is going to be the big problem to solve going forward, is how do we use these pieces that we have been given in a more layered sense, and how do we keep our import minimal, in the sense that I do want to have enough spaces to use my woes, right? And I do want to not open myself up really hard to a Raigeki, right? Because if you're like, oh, if they're Raigeki, I'll just use my Ilia Silver Omni-Negate, right? So Raigeki is bad against White Forest. Well, what if you don't have the Ilia Silver on the board because they nipped you on your turn, or they drawled you and you had to use the Ilia Silver and you were not in a position to get it back, or maybe they just hand trapped you into the ground, right? And you can end on your Diabell and your Sin Adjudicator, but then it's like, okay, what about just a Raigeki or a Lightning Storm even, right? You have a back row, and how do we protect ourselves from just being, way too easily disrupted? And I think Also, my current version of this deck also has that problem in some senses, in that I end on Saint, Morgana, Diabelle, and Iliasavir, right? So it's still 4 monsters, but we do have one of them in the extra monster zone, of course. So we do have 2 zones most of the time. And no, oh, and then I also often end on Diabelle Star, actually. Because I use the Sinful Sponsored Betrayal Trap card. And I just also really like ending on Diabelle Star, because her effect to come back on the opponent's turn just synergizes really nicely with the fusion spell. Because you can send her to the graveyard as a fusion material, she will come back and she will provide you follow-up for the next turn. So I really like ending on Diabelle Star. I think it also provides a lot of resiliency, because if they Regeki you or something like that, your Diabelle Star will also come back. And yeah. But so I have four cards that five monsters, I guess, actually, that I end on as well. So I'm not saying that my combo is like doesn't feed into this issue. But and so if you just were to add the Sin Adjudicator to that board, you would have full board, right? You would have six pieces of monsters, and that's just like it doesn't even look that good, right? It's just like it's too much, right? We don't need to end on that many monsters. Like, even I feel like or maybe a beginner Yu-Gi-Oh player cannot really see why that's an issue, because it's like, look at how many interruptions there are. But maybe some more seasoned players can see that is usually maybe a bit more of a weakness than a strength. Granted that you will probably still win that game, right? It's not like if you go full combo and end on 6 monsters and a couple and some nice back row cards that you will lose the game. It's not really like that at all, right? But if you look like something like Two Elements or something like that, or like most decks, honestly, most decks right now, the top tier decks don't end on a full field of boss monsters. Like, Raichu has a very lean end board, obviously. It's more of a mid-range deck. But even like the combo like Malice, there's not a lot of monsters on the field, and that makes them less vulnerable to something like, a board wipe. You also have other combo decks like Memento, for example. Memento does not end on a ton of monsters and boss monsters on the field. Like, it's very layered, and I think that I think we can do something similar in White Forest, honestly. There is definitely the tools to create a very layered input, in particular the fusion spell. So, maybe something like ending on Saint Asamina is maybe not necessary, although it is a very strong endboard piece. Maybe it's not necessary to end on Saint Asamina. Maybe it's what we make with the fusion spell on our opponent's turn. Instead of Guiding Camera, we make something like Saint Asamina. Or maybe what I really wanted to do is just, good old regular Asamina. The new Asamina boss monster, which name is just Asamina. I do actually have it, but funny thing is that it wasn't available in the proxy site that I am using. I don't know why. I think there's might be some issues with the name of it just being Asamina, but I did print a scuffed version. Here she is. She is just super cool, and I think also pretty powerful. And I will say she is actually one of the reasons for why I've been playing Queen Asamina in all my builds currently. And obviously we can't make her right now, so, you know, why would you play Queen Asamina? Basically, I just want to practice using Queen Asamina because I think that Queen Asamina might actually be relevant in order to make Asamina. And I do think that she's a pretty powerful endboard piece. And you can make her with just the Queen Asamina and any fusion or any synchro. I think it's just any synchro. Or just any fusion or synchro, maybe. I can't actually remember exactly, but it's a pretty easy thing to make. Of course, you do need to have Queen Asmina, and so we need to search her out in some way. But overall, it's not a difficult card to fusion summon if you have the Queen Asmina. And so you can definitely make it on your opponent's turn using the fusion spell. And of course, maybe that is what maybe we make Saint on our turn, and then our opponent's turn we try to make as a regular Asamina. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a ton of options, and I think it's very interesting, but I do also want to try to create a version that is less reliant on just putting everything on the board. Like we are basically doing currently. Yeah. I also think this new Mystic Mystery of the White Forest is a super cool card. And you can make it on your own turn with the fusion spell. Oh, sorry, with the field spell, right? Because you can make one of your level 2 White Forest monsters into a tuner. And then you can use that tuner with another level 2 White Forest. And you can just make this Mystic Mystery of the White Forest on your own turn. Which is pretty cool, right? Because it's basically a quick synchro on your opponent's turn, and so that's pretty cool. But then again, right, if you end on this, it's just like another thing that you end on, right? It's just, there's too many monsters that you want to end the turn on, and we need some way of creating a very strong combo that does not have that Achilles heel of just putting every boss monster on the field immediately. And so I think it's gonna be interesting to see. The Mystic Mystery, you can probably just make it with the Sin Adjudicator, right? On your opponent's turn, or you can even just summon it with the Diabell. There's a bunch of ways to get this onto the field, and then you can of course use it to make like the new Execute Dragon, which I'm gonna be honest, I don't really see the hype for this card. I think that it's nice that it's a Synchro 12 because we do have a lot of level 8 monsters, and the Mystic Mystery makes making level 12 synchros easy, and there's not too many good ones right now, like apart from Crimson Dragon. But if you play Crimson Dragon, you're just creating like, you know, just going more combo. Like, I don't think that this deck needs Crimson Dragon, and I don't think that Crimson Dragon is solving any of this deck's problems. Like, we don't have an issue with our end board not being strong enough. We don't need Crimson Dragon and making Blazers or you know, all sorts of level 12 boss monsters. That's just not necessary, and also don't think there will be room in the extra deck for that at all. And so having just one thing that we can make level 12 is pretty nice, but I don't think it's actually that, like, I don't know, it's like during either players during the main phase, you can target one face-up monster on the field, or in either graveyard, place it in its owner's spell trap zone as a continuous spell. So it's like a quick effect subversion, right? And I mean, that is nice. And during the battle phase, you can target 2 cards on the field, one master and one continuous spell. Destroy them. And you can also do that during your opponent's battle phase, so it's like a pretty big wall and makes them very tough. Makes it basically tough for them to kill you. But obviously they don't have to go to the battle phase. So this might not come up at all, like, and maybe they can just out this card before going to the battle phase. And so, because you have to use the first effect in the main phase, so there's no, it's like, and you can also only use Mystic Mystery effects to quick synchro in the main phase, so you have to kind of make this in the main phase, and then they know it's there, and maybe they can just out it and go into the battle phase. And obviously it's just like, okay, then it's one more thing that they have to out, and if they out this and not your other stuff, then you're kind of happy, right? But it's also like your big play being a quick play subversion. That's your like your level 12 synchro that you like you use your Diabell to summon this, or you use your Synergy Adjudicator to summon this, then you use this to synchro into this Execute Dragon, and that then your big move is to place one of their monsters into the spell and trap zone. Like, compared to the things you have to commit your Diabell, which you obviously would much rather use to just create a Book of Eclipse like your Silvera. You have to use your, or if you don't use your Diabell, you'll have to use your Sin Adjudicator, which you obviously can also just make the Book of Eclipse, right? So if you choose to make this Mystic Mystery of the White Forest, it has to be because there's a powerful reason to do it over just making a Book of Eclipse, right? And the powerful reason is apparently a quick play, quick effect subversion. I don't know. I don't know. People are really hyped about the Execute Dragon, and it's not like I'm saying it's bad or at all or something like that, but I would most of the time take the Silvera, which just places the monster face down, right? That's like, I guess against link decks, if they manage to get out a link and then you obviously cannot book it, or against fusion decks, where turning your opponent's monster's face down is maybe not as strong, because you can just use it for their fusion summon, in those cases maybe. But I don't know. And obviously you can also just use Mystic Mystery of the White Forest to, you could even use that to synchro into the Book of Eclipse. So I don't know. And I also have not really explored what other kind of things you can make using the Mystic Mystery. But I do think that the Execute Dragon is probably pretty strong going second. If you can manage to make it, then it can be pretty effective at breaking the board, right? But yeah. So I don't know. It's probably really strong. Maybe it's like one of those cards where I play with it and then I realize, whoa, it's actually much stronger than I thought. But just on paper, just when looking at it, it doesn't seem that strong, and not necessarily like most of the time. Let's just imagine that the Book of Eclipse is stronger. But I don't know, maybe not. Does also hit things in the graveyard, right? So maybe that is sort of very relevant actually. But yeah. And then we also have the new White Forest card, I guess, the Diabelsa, the White Witch. This one right here, which is, just a level 8 extender that basically it gets you to the Sin Adjudicator. And I guess maybe if you're like, I kind of need to use this level 8 body for something, then you could maybe make the execute dragon and end on that. It does also do make it so that your monster cannot be destroyed by card effects while you have 2 or more diabell monsters. So you can just end on her and the Sentient Adjudicator and also diabell, I guess. And that's pretty strong also. But again, it's like, here's more things that you can put. Here's more monsters that you want to end on, right? You know, you can end on diabell, so the Black Witch will give all your monsters destruction protection, and that's really good, right? And it is, but it's also like, we already have enough monsters that we want to end on. We are getting a bunch of extra things that we to end on, and how exactly will this pan out? Because a lot like the Sin Adjudicator, I don't really see a very clear way of summoning this out during our opponent's turn. Like, maybe you can put her in the spell trap zones with Mystic Mystery of the White Forest, and then maybe you could use like some Snake Eyes card to summon it, like Flame Purge Dragon or something. I don't know. You could summon it with Sorceress, I guess, from the graveyard. You could summon it with Sorceress. Is that really strong? I don't know. Maybe Sorceress will become a strong card now that we have so many things to end on, that if just putting one of those things in the graveyard or banish and having the ability to quick effect summon it during our opponent's turn is actually what makes it so that our board becomes more layered. But of course, if you search Sorceress, there's other things that you cannot search, and so on and so forth, right? So in general, I think the new cards are very cool. I'm looking forward to bring with them, but it is also a bit concerning how many things that we are supposed to end on the field. It's like, it's too much, and I think the real challenge will be choosing which ones to end on rather than finding a way to end on all of them. Like, I think the true challenge will be in prioritizing which of these things are actually really good, and maybe also creating a combo that lets us tag in during our opponent's turn, so that we can make some of these boss monsters during our opponent's turn, and in that way make our interruptions more layered. But yeah, I think I'll have to maybe go to locals now, so I think I'm just gonna turn the video off, and I hope that I get time soon again to make a video, maybe tomorrow, although I have some other plans tomorrow, so we'll see. But yeah, thank you for watching.